Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Super Soul Farm, this is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha. Welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome to Sleeping Saturday. You know what? I mystically slept in. I didn't even try it. I just slept in. My body just let me sleep. Well, usually I just wake right up without an alarm, and this time my body just said, you know what? It's Sleeping Saturday. You need to rest. Rest is underrated. It's important. And I'm here live with Yvette Elizabeth, Priya G, and Kishori, who just showed up, and little Amalini just showed up this morning. And if you're listening on Facebook, welcome. We do this every day. Srimad Bhagavatam study, basically Monday through Friday. Catch us wherever you get podcasts or YouTube. And also Saturday and Sunday, we have Q&A. And tomorrow is a special day. Usually we do it at 8 o'clock. Tomorrow's interview with Harley Flanagan is happening.
It's happening.
But Harley says he doesn't speak to anybody before noon.
So then we do it at noon.
So we're doing it at noon because we want to get an interview with Harley. Parents, watch your kids. We're trying to keep this guy in parameters, but it's tough. But me and Kaustubha are eternally in debt to him because he got us it's sort of like hand delivered the science of bhakti to us when we were teenagers. And he's lived quite a fascinating life. And he's a year younger than me. And we're the same age, Kaustubha. So he's a year younger than us. Mm-hmm. Any other announcements, my friends, before we dive into Q&A day?
So tomorrow's show is at noon, and then we have a Bhakti recovery group meeting today at 9:30.
Okay, great. All right. Well, Kaustubha.
Yeah.
I've got a
question. Q&A day. Oh, I got a question for you.
You got a question for me? Hit me.
Okay, this is coming from Devadarna Devidasi.
Devadarna Devidasi.
Okay.
I call her 3D.
Or 4D. Devadarna Devidasi. 3D though. The 3D is maybe better.
It's a four-dimensional universe.
That's
with
right.
Devadarna Devidasi.
She's entered the fourth dimension. So she writes via email, and if people want to write in questions, Mara, how did they do it?
wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com.
Okay. So she wrote in and she said, I had a strange childhood. I always knew that I would care for my parents when they became older. This is a question about Dharma. All right, Raghu?
Okay. Yep.
I left ashram life and cared for them as well as for my children. Okay, so she left the ashram to care for family members. After my parents left this world, I stayed with my kids for some time, and then I realized that I must somehow reconnect with my Guru Maharaj. I had a brother who should have taken care of my folks, but he was not capable of doing so. I left my family so that I could meditate, chant the Mahamantra. So I guess she did that previously, right?
Yeah.
Now she's saying, could this be seen as my duty? I mean, caring for my folks when they needed me. I know that I should not do another's duty, but what else was I to do? Prabhus, can you please advise?
That's a great question. we've created a culture, sadly, where as parents, we're taking care of kids, we're wiping butts, we're shuffling them around to soccer and Boy Scouts, we're giving everything. And when the parents get older, there's a lot of just neglect, and it's just like, this is too much for me to do. I'm gonna outsource them to somebody else. But yeah, it's a very noble act to take care of a sick parent or a needy parent as they've taken care of us. And it might not even feel that spiritual, right? It might not feel that spiritual. It's like, come on, I can't wake up early. They're a little bit too needy, etc. It's an incredible yajna or incredible sacrifice, but it's in that sacrifice that we grow in this world. So I think it's an incredibly beautiful thing that she did that. And then Krishna will, sometimes even sometimes I was just talking to a friend / student / devotee who's just like slugging it out in a marriage that has never worked. And he's got kids, and he's really struggling. And you could see, though, in that struggle of trying to, support them and deal with it and still try to practice bhakti, he's getting purified. There's always a purification in some type of sacrifice. And sometimes we have a child that's disabled, or sometimes we have some other situation where causes like, this isn't the perfect Krishna consciousness. I remember having 2 little babies when Sachi and Raka were little, and trying to reconnect with God as I knew it, which for me was, hey, you go to a kirtan, you're feeling low, you go to a kirtan, you go chant some extra japa. So I remember driving down to New York City, which is a whole hassle when you live upstate, especially with 2 little kids, taking these kids to the kirtan. And I was like, finally, a nice kirtan. I haven't been around a good kirtan in a long time. Sat there, and both kids are like totally out of control. And I'm just losing my mind. It's like, all I want is a little peace. And then after talking to a friend, he said, maybe you should reframe what you think of a spiritual experience to be. Sometimes it's just not going to be this ideal setting where I'm sitting in Vrindavan, sitting in front of the deities, hands in the air, and, spinning around. That might be it, but there might be another opportunity for a spiritual experience. And that's that sacrifice that we make in life and in love. There's I remember having to wake up my older stepson's type 1 diabetic. So I'd have to, and he was constantly getting seizures. And right before bed, I'd have to check his blood while he was asleep. And then at 2 a.m, I'd set an alarm and check his blood. And like 4 a.m, I'd have to check his blood. And it was like to what it's like to wreck your sleep in the middle of the night. It's like so exhausting to the nervous system. But I will say, I developed more love for that kid during that practice, because I really feel like I want to serve this person. I'm not getting anything necessarily back from it, except that feeling of giving to someone who needs. And in that sort of sacrifice, there's purification. What do you think about that, Kaustubha?
I agree with you. It's funny because I think I understand, and maybe others might not have picked up on like the nature of the question, because in one sense, it's almost like that it should be obvious that, like, taking care of your parents is dharma. Like conceptually, that's like dharma is all about that kind of thing, right? Like it's the dharma of the parents to take care of the children, and then it ultimately becomes the dharma of the children to care for the parents when they get older. Like, and if you don't do that, you're bringing really bad karma onto yourself. Like that would be a typical kind of Vedic conception. But then there's like a principle like in Bhakti that says, ultimately, if you give your entire life to God, you have no debts to anyone, right? You're not indebted to the devas, to the demigods, so you don't have to do sacrifices to them. You're not indebted to your parents or to the forefathers or to anyone, because you're giving yourself entirely to God, which is what life is all meant to steer us in that direction anyway, and you're already there. But how many of us are fully dedicated like that,
I know. We use that as a sort of a ticket to get out of responsibilities.
Yeah. And at the same time, there may be a situation that's like that, like where parents are antagonistic to your practicing bhakti and you're trying to make it all work and they're not going to allow it to work. And then you say, you know what, this is just not working I need to dedicate my life to God, and these people aren't allowing it. And if you don't, if you do, in a sense, disconnect from them, it's not that you've done anything wrong, because you're serving that root, because you're connected to that root.
You know how many times I use that verse to make people join the temple? Like join the ashram.
What is it?
Like join the ashram.
Bhuptam,
Devarshi bhutapta nrinam pitrinam.
Pitrinam.
Like once
You've got
you surrender to
Yeah.
Krishna, you've got, and because the kids, I was like, you should just move into the ashram. Mara, if you don't know, I was a massive persuader. People moving into an ashram. Travel around with my band. What are you doing with your life? Nothing. Well,
moving to the
don't you
ashram
think
then.
life is important? Yes. Well, do you believe in God? Yes. Well, do you believe God is significant? Yeah. A series of questions to get them to finally admit, like, what the hell are you doing? And then finally, it culminating with, well, I have school and I have this job. I'm sort of working this job, and then I have this going on in my life. Devarshi bhutapta nrinam. Once you pay Krishna the debt, because you have a lot of debts to a lot of people, but you have one debt to Krishna. That's the biggest debtor. If we pay back Krishna, all our other debts are satisfied. So I use that, sometimes out of context, yes.
Okay. But it's true. There's truth in that. And I think that's where her question's coming from. And like, shouldn't I be giving myself entirely to God? And these people that aren't even particularly interested in it, now it seems like I gave up a life of deep meditation on God to take up a life of, quote unquote, like mundane, worldly responsibilities. But it's through that dharma. Again, we've said this before, right? That duty, is the first step in mastering the mind. So it is a way of surrender, and it is something that helps qualify one for meditation ultimately.
Sure.
That selflessness.
Generally, we're just doing time. We're just doing a little time to get through this, to grow. And that's what we do. It might seem like a prison sometimes. It may not seem like that joy, but in the same way, the prison is supposed to rectify us, rectify our consciousness. It's been all about me, everything I want all the time. And now is the time to give a little bit. So it's actually beautiful to hear this question. And I think it was a good thing. And Krishna will bring you back, if you're not already back, in a very focused way, in a more refined way. David Dharna, David Dasi.
There you go.
Okay. This is from MKSD. Oh, it's from MKSD. I thought it was UKMK.
No,
all right, it's MKSD.
San Diego.
MKSD San Diego, our good friend from San Diego. Big supporter of the show as well. He's always an eternal other, though, because he's a Californian.
West Coaster.
Pam Ho, that is short for, please accept my humble obeisances. Pam Ho. And please excuse my grammar and spelling in advance. Raghu, Kaustubha, and Mara, thank you for your commitment to bring such a thoughtful, amazing, and much needed Sangha to those of us with a busy life. He has a busy life. He runs, what's it called? Well, he runs
Ben
the
and
Pappy's
Esther's?
Barbershop. Ben and Esther's Vegan Deli. Yeah, in San Diego.
But he's got other things too, right?
Yeah, he's got Pappy's Barbershop. It's all Krishna conscious / straight edge / vegan. So it's great.
Okay.
I have a question about doing your dharma. I'm a business person to the core. It drives me. It excites me. And despite barely graduating high school and never going to college, for some reason, I'm good at opening businesses and managing people. Even though I've been a devotee since the 90s, I'm not a great preacher, cannot memorize verses, and I'm not good at kirtan. However, I use my business savviness as my way of providing service via being able to donate to many things, including my local temple, causes I feel are important to the world, taking care of my immediate and extended family, etc. One of my businesses even distributes 100 plates of prasadam every single day. And I also donate to many other things within our Bhakti community, including Wisdom of the Sages, by the way. Here is the challenge. And that's why his question got picked. Kidding. We don't favor donors. Yes, we do. Even though I'm chanting 16 rounds daily, taking care of my deities at home, and reading Prabhupada's books every day, I find myself meditating on business about 99% of the time. It's distracting to my spiritual practice and interferes with my family life. When I'm chanting japa, I'm thinking of my next business venture. If I'm cleaning my temple room or playing with my kids, I'm thinking about business meeting the next day. if I'm doing my dharma in business, which is supporting so many necessary and important things in my life and within our bhakti community, but it's distracting me. I need some tips on what to do to settle this constant meditation on business. I want constant meditation on Krishna, not on where the next business venture is going to be. Please help. Your humble servant, friend, and well-wisher, MKSD, Mukunda Kishore.
All right. So,
Great question, huh?
I love it. Like last week and this week, we're getting a lot of questions related to people's business ventures and how it relates to their spiritual life. And, so this is great. And Mukunda Kishore, he really is, kind of like a shining example of a person that's, taking his talents and engaging them in service. But his question is a really important one. He's saying, you know what, I do that. I'm a natural business person, and I can do it successfully. But it dominates my consciousness all the time. And aren't we meant to be bringing our mind to Krishna? He said, how did he say it? He said, I want constant meditation on Krishna, not on where the next business venture is going to be. And so that is our goal, right? Is that Bhagavad-gita will establish that. I was thinking of that verse. I think it's a verse from the Puranas, but Rupa Goswami highlights this verse, and it's a verse that my wife chants every day as part of her puja. But there's a verse: Yuvatinam yata yuni, yunam cha yavatau yata, mano bhir ramate tadvan, mano me ramatam tvai. And it's a verse that reveals like how bhakti yoga works, right? Is that actually you love God, and so that draws your mind. Like that's the samadhi, is that you're always in consciousness of God. So that verse says, just as the minds of young girls take pleasure in thinking of young boys, and just as young boys, the minds of young boys take pleasure in always thinking of young girls, kindly let my mind always take pleasure in you, Krishna, right? Like I want my mind to naturally go to you. And so Mukunda Kishore is saying, like, that's where I want my mind to go. But it just seems like this business passion just kind of dominates, even though these are really good business, and they're not like adharmic businesses, and some of them are like even, directly devotional service. But when I sit down to focus my mind on God, why can't I focus? Why is there no attraction? Like that's what I'm serving for. I want to come to that stage. And so I get it. What we want to do, what Mukunda Kishore and all of us are trying to do, is we're trying to map out a strategy in life. Like this is how we're going to practice bhakti. We need to get from point A to point B, right? And point A is where I am right now, and I have a mind that's distracted. I've got ever-changing emotions that are tied to material circumstance, and so I'm kind of like this. Being blown in the breeze, or going up and down in the waves of, happiness one moment and distress the next, and, some kind of satisfaction and then some kind of anxiety. And I want to bring my mind all the way to love, where just no matter what the external situation is, I'm connected to that divine root and in a deep state of love. So that's point B. And somehow we have to map out a path to get there. And, the Gita, it all is all about doing that. It'll show, according to where you're at, how to apply yourself, I think even last week we were speaking about this, right? The 12th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, but it's so practical when it comes to like, business or worldly responsibilities and so on. So in that 12th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, beginning in text 8, Krishna describes different levels of, you could say, meditation on him, right? Like, He says that in text 8, he says, Mayeva mana adhatsva, that just fix your mind on me, right? Just Arjuna, if you want to come to the highest level of spiritual awareness, just fix your mind on me. But what we find is that we can't do that. We struggle. Even, we try to devote ourselves in so many ways, but the mind still goes all over the place. And Mukunda Kishore's mind is always thinking about business, even when he's chanting his japa, right? And so, then Krishna says, I get it. Not everyone can do that. That's we're ultimately where we want to get. But he says, but if you can't do that, then he says, abhyasa yogena, then you practice yoga, right? And specifically in this context, he's speaking about bhakti yoga. He says, my dear Arjuna, if you cannot fix your mind upon me without deviation, then follow the regulative principles of bhakti yoga and in this way develop a desire to attain me. And so, Mukunda Kishore is doing that, right? He's an initiated devotee. That's where he got the name Mukunda Kishore, right?
Yeah.
And when he got initiated, that means he took vows to begin these regulations, these principles, following the regulative principles of Bhakti Yoga. And it means part of that is his chanting of japa, which he does, 16 rounds. That's like around 2 hours a day, meditating on that. But still, my mind is fixed on business when I'm doing, I'm trying to do the regulative principles, and still I can't bring my mind to them. That's the issue, right? If my mind was deeply absorbed in this chanting, then I could get to that stage where I could more easily always have my mind fixed on God. Right? Like, in other words, if the first verse, text 8, said, just fix your mind on me always. Well, I wish I could do that. Okay, then do this practice of japa where you sit down and you bring your mind to this mantra. Okay, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that for 2 hours every day. But still, when I sit down to do that, my mind is totally somewhere else. And so then Krishna says, well, that's okay. Then if, in the next verse, he says, if you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, and if when you do them, your mind's not there, then just try to work for me. Because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. And so that's what Mukunda Kishore is doing, right? Well, that's what I'm doing. So, I have one business, I take the profits of my business and I try to make an offering to Krishna of them. I even have a business that's like all about distributing Krishna Prasad to people so that people can benefit from that. So that's what I'm doing. So okay, then, it's, in one sense, then we have to understand this is going to take some patience, right? Utsahad, Nischaya, Dharya. These principles are given that they're particularly favorable for developing bhakti, that it requires utsaha, enthusiasm, and nischayat, it requires endeavoring with confidence, but it also, dharyat, right? It requires patience. And so this is a lifetime practice, that like, what Mukunda Kishore is doing is it's kind of a combination of the second instruction and the third instruction, right? Follow the regulative principles of bhakti. That means I'm going to part of his principles is he's going to sit down and chant japa, chant Mahamantra, meditate on Mahamantra for, a certain amount of rounds every day. And I'm doing that, but even when I'm doing that, I feel like I'm not fully benefiting from it because my mind is still caught up in my business. Okay, then make your business an offering to him, so that even when you're doing that business, you're thinking about him, right? And especially with a business like his restaurant, you can do that, but you can't. Even some businesses may be like not so directly connected, And so combine all these things, and then be patient, but never forget why you're doing what you do. Never forget that when you sit down to chant japa, when you read Bhagavad-gita or Bhagavatam regularly, and the other devotional practices, visiting the temple, doing deity worship, making offerings in your home, like when you eat, all of these things, understand that your mind is meant to be absorbed in them. And maybe you have a hard time absorbing your mind in them right now. Well, that's where you have to remain enthusiastic, but then you also have to be patient. And that's the combination, right? I'm going to do this with enthusiasm, even if I'm not feeling it right now, even if my mind isn't spontaneously going to Krishna with love, I'm patient, and I'm going to remain enthusiastic because I know this is a lifetime endeavor that I'm taking up here, right? And so do your japa and try to improve it every day, but also be patient. Realize that, how old is Mukunda Kishore, Raghu, roughly?
45, maybe.
Okay, so let's say he's 45. And maybe he's been practicing bhakti for 10 or 15 years, something like that?
15 years, probably.
Okay.
Getting more serious in
Okay.
the last 5, probably.
Yeah, and so you got a lifetime strategy that you're mapping out, right? That like, you're going to be 55, 65, 75. Where are you going to be when you're 75? Don't worry. Understand that it's natural that when you sit down to chant your japa right now, your mind is elsewhere. You're relatively young, you're relatively passionate, but you're doing the right thing. You're engaging that passion in Krishna's service. And the more that you do it, and the more that you sacrifice, and the more that you practice, you're on this path so that when you're a 75-year-old man and you're not doing business anymore, and that passion that you have for business right now, it will begin to settle. By Krishna's grace, it'll begin to settle. By the force of time, it'll begin to settle. And you want to be that when you're in your 70s, now your mind is fully absorbed, and so keep working steadily towards that, and have faith it will come. But do all that you can now, and be aware of exactly why you're doing it. Be aware of why you're sitting down to chant. Don't think you want to bring your meditation from the point of like, I do it every day because I took the vow to do it, although my mind's not focused on it. Step by step, you want to bring it deeper to actually you're doing it because you want to do it. You're doing it because you are feeling something special from it, and that'll be gradual. You can't rush that, but you keep trying for it. You keep praying for it. You keep begging for it. You do that your whole life, and it will come by the blessings of the devotees, by the blessings of Krishna. That same practice that you're doing now, you'll be doing the exact same practice 10, 20, 30 years from now, but it'll be deeper if you follow, and if you do this with humility, if you do this with determination, if you do it with patience, if you're careful about, when it says follow those regulative principles, that means I'm not offending others, I'm caring about others. And also, while you're at work, do all that you can while you're at work to endear yourself to Krishna, and to bring your mind to truth, and to make that setting a form in which you practice bhakti. I think we spoke about this last week, right? Like you go to work, there may be a lot of people coming to work. There may be, coming like as customers, there may be very few people. I'm going to keep an even mind every way. People may treat me kindly. People may treat me unkindly when I go to work today. I'm going to respond with kindness either way. You make that your life. And if you live that life and you do it steadily, with patience over the course of decades, by the time you're an old man, your meditation will be in a whole nother place, So stay steady, stay patient, stay enthusiastic, keep following the practices, and pray and beg for that deeper meditation, and it'll come. Meanwhile, don't worry about it. It's something that by Krishna's grace, you'll be able to fix your mind on him, right? It's by his grace. So just keep working to satisfy him, and don't beat yourself up because your mind's problematic. Just keep doing all that you can to engage that mind in whatever way you can connect it to Krishna. If it's by meditating on your business that it becomes connected to Krishna, then meditate on that business. And if when you sit down to chant your japa and you want to forget about business, it's still there, just be patient and and steady, and gradually you'll get there. I have faith that he'll get there.
You're lucky.
All right.
I'd say also plan out your future. Make a plan. Like you were saying, what are you going to be doing at 65, 75, 55? Make a plan. How do you want to spend it? And how do you want to spend this year? Do you need a week out of the year where you're just hearing and chanting?
There you go.
To sort of, and what does that mean for you? Do you go on a retreat? Do you go alone? Do you step away from the business, maybe even from the family? He's also very balanced in his family life,
Right.
But maybe you need to step away from the family, just get into your sadhana. Maybe you need to go to India for a week and go to a holy place.
These are great points. I always think of it like in the Yoga Sutras, it says that when you do something repeatedly over a long period of time, it becomes firmly rooted. And so I think, therefore, and that works for yoga practice or spiritual practice, and it also works for the mind being engaged in other things, right? In other words, because you do business and you do it every day and you do it over a course of years, that becomes firmly rooted. But what you need to do is you need to break it up. You need to break up the regularity. And you do that in the course of the day by dedicating some hours in the day exclusively to bhakti. But you also need to do that throughout the year, right? Dedicate some chunk of time exclusively to bhakti, and you'll break up the ability for the I don't want to say mundane or materialistic thought, because even his material life, but you break up the worldliness in your mind. You don't let it become as deeply rooted. So I think that's really important too. Nice, Raghu. Okay, you ready?
Hit me.
Oh, this come from Cherry.
Cherry Yannick from Oceanside, California.
That's right, formerly of Brooklyn, right?
Mm-hmm.
She writes, I hope, this is a little bit old, but it's going back. She says, I hope you're all doing well in Nepal and London. We're both back.
We're back.
Thanks always for all that you do. I know a lot of times on Wisdom of the Sages, there's talk about how we shouldn't judge others. I really struggle with this sometimes. Can you please offer advice on how we can do our best to not judge others? I often catch myself in the process of judging someone and am able to stop myself, but I'd like to prevent myself from even getting there. Let's go deeper.
Great question. It's a great question because she's noticing it. And most people don't even notice it. They just do it. It's just part of their repertoire of how they relate to people, of what goes on in their mind, of what goes on in their conversation. And that's the first thing. It's just like if you're trying to control your diet and someone says, you should really take out all white sugars from your diet. And you start realizing, wow, there's white sugar in this, there's white sugar in this, there's white sugar. Once you start to put a restriction on something, it sort of magnifies how much you're doing this thing. So it's the beginning of getting over it, is to noticing it. And sometimes it feels like, what a Mount Everest I have to climb to overcome this bad habit. So first of all, Sherry, congratulations on noticing it. And it also can't be confused with, in the name of not judging, we don't want to throw away our discernment. It's okay to discern, but we don't want to condemn. That's what we mean by judging. We misuse this word sometimes. Don't judge, meaning I should turn off all discernment. Like everything's okay. It's yoga. What he did is all good. It's all God. No, there's definitely some right and wrong going on in the world. And it's okay to sharpen our discernment. And that's what we have to do in a yoga system, and creating dharma and auspicious ripple effects in our life and the lives of our family. If I see something going wrong, I have to call it out. That's part of discernment. It's not judgment. It's not condemnation. If a person acts a certain way, like if I started to act a certain way, and for Kaustubha to say, hey, Raghunath, that's not good the way you're acting. It's not really good for your spiritual life and all your students' spiritual life to see you do that activity. I really think you should. That's not criticizing me or judging me. It's discerning. And that condemnation is when I hold someone to that behavior. You know the difference? You're holding them. This is what you are. This person act like a liar. They act as a philanderer. You are this. Sometimes we hear about a guru that's fallen down. They were never sincere. And we lash out. They never had any good qualities, or how dare they? And we hold them to their activity. So as devotees, we want to discern. We want to see what's right and wrong. And sometimes when things are wrong, we have to step away from those people or that situation. But at the same time, we don't want to condemn someone. We're always praying for someone's rectification. There's not ill will when someone does something wrong. And that's what I think you're feeling. I'm seeing this person walking in the room. Who do they think they are? Don't they get it? Why don't they, why aren't they more realized? How dare they do these things? That's a condemnation, because just a moment ago, we were doing those things. Probably just a moment ago, we were doing those things. So it's nice to be always wishing people well, hoping for their rectification if they're from a high position and they fell down, or hoping the world improves like that. And of course, the best way to improve the world and improve others is to be a shining example yourself. One of these great Stephen Covey quotes, which I like to quote, is how strict can I be with myself and how lenient can I be with others? It's like a very powerful statement. So we want to discern, good thing. We don't want to condemn people. I've just thrown that word judge out of the equation because people misuse it. But don't condemn and do discern. And when you notice it, like you have, let the red flag go up and catch yourself. And eventually it's a practice. And like anything else, it's a practice. Like you want to become a good cook, you got to practice. You want to become a good handstands, you got to practice. You want to be good at not finding fault with others, That's a very powerful practice in your bhakti because God is within everybody's heart. Here you go.
Okay, nice, Raghu. Yeah, you're familiar with that? I think what you just said really answered her question, because she's saying, like, I'm actually practicing it, right? Like, I do catch myself doing that, and that red flag goes up. But I want to get to the point where I don't even have to do that, like, right, where, like, no red flag will go up because I'm not even getting there. And like you're saying, that comes, like, the mind becomes trained by the way we just have to choose to train it. And so if every time your mind goes in a direction that you don't want to go, you pull it back, gradually it just starts not to go there. You know,
it's real. It's a practice. Like where you practice handstands, you practice handstands. Next thing you know, you're doing a handstand.
Yeah.
All right. I got a question for you.
Before you go, I was just going to share that one more thing. You know that thing some of our friends used to do where you put like a band around one wrist?
Yeah.
And then like
it, or no, you put it on the other wrist if you criticize
somebody. Every time you get into that judgmental thing and you actually act on it, I just did what I decided I didn't want to do. Then you take it off of the one wrist and you put it on the other, right? So like you kind of mark it that way. And the goal becomes, can I go the day without moving it from one wrist to the next? Can I go a week without moving it from one week, from one wrist to the next? And you do like that, and gradually the mind becomes accustomed to it. So yeah.
Pretty good. Mara, can you do that?
Sure.
Sure. What do you mean?
It wasn't a question if you can do it going forward. Do you do it now? Can you sit a day without criticizing someone, without moving that band to the other wrist?
No, I think I'd have to move the band.
You don't criticize. You don't even talk much. How do you criticize much?
She's talking even on the level of
woman
the
barely
mind.
talks.
Even on the level of the mind. No, she runs a business, Raghunath. She's got to get heavy with people all the time.
I don't know.
She runs that place like with an iron fist.
I thought she had a bunch of saintly servants in that kitchen.
No. That's only because she's on top of them all the time.
All right, my friend. This is from my old good friend Teddy Bear, Paul Bear, originally from Scranton. I call him the Teddy Bear. I call him just Teddy. Paul Bear, originally from Scranton. He has to put that in because Scranton. He's a Scrantonian, now living in the UK with our UK
Paul Bear,
brethren.
UK.
Paul Bear, UK. Hope you all are having a wonderful time in India. This is old. It's a couple weeks old.
We've been answering too few questions in the previous weeks.
Yeah. Just wondering if I can put another question in for Q&A day. I was doing my japa this morning and I realized that my practice has been all over the place. All these questions are connected miraculously. It's going to be a year in May since discovering all of you in Bhakti. Happy birthday. How much importance is placed on 16 rounds? It always goes there. And continuing a regular session. I admit I feel more grounded after completing my rounds. It's the days that I feel all over the place that I know I should be chanting the Lord's names. My question is, in modern day bhakti, is chanting 16 rounds a day a must for all of us involved in this past? Thanks again, and look forward to meeting you on a retreat soon.
All right.
Teddy Bear, Paul Bear. Thank you for that.
Okay,
Give me a hug.
Paul, nice question, Paul. And in case this is new to some people that aren't familiar, that within the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which is a branch of a Bhakti Yoga lineage that is spread throughout the whole world, and which was led and founded by Srila Prabhupada, he established a standard that when you take a certain level of commitment, right, at a certain level of commitment, where the guru formally accepts the disciple as their student, the student formally accepts the guru as their teacher, as their guru, certain vows are taken. In other words, the guru is becoming responsible. In a sense, it's like the guru is saying, I'm making a personal commitment to you to do all that it takes to give you the instruction and the guidance and set the example and so on, so that you will go from point A to point B, right? So that all that you need to attain that high state of consciousness, I will do all that I can to provide that for you. And I take personal responsibility for being there for you so that you can get from point A to point B. In order for you to do that, here's what I need you to do. Right? Here's what I need you to do. And the disciple is saying, okay, I'm ready to become your student and to take your instruction and apply it in my life with great sincerity and determination. And so one of the things in this particular forum, Srila Prabhupada established it as a standard that upon becoming an initiated disciple and formalizing that commitment on both ends, that the guru gives the instruction and the disciple accepts the instruction to chant 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra every day. Now, 16 rounds means one round. A round means around the mala, around the rosary in a sense, right? A string of beads with 108 beads. You chant the mantra 108 times as you go around. So the vow taken is to chant it to go around 16 times. And that's, it's a serious commitment, right? Because for most people, it does take about 2 hours a day. And for a lot of people, they're going to be like, 2 hours a day? I don't know how I'm going to squeeze that in there. But you do. You find a way. But people do have trouble maintaining it too. And so the question is this 16 rounds, is that particularly important in this day and age? Is it important? And must I do that? Well, it becomes important when you take the vow, right? It becomes, if you make that commitment, then ideally you want to maintain that, if we're being asked if when we make that commitment, we're saying, I'm ready to follow your instructions, and then we don't follow them and we break those vows, that's not a healthy situation. It can be rectified, but it's certainly not ideal. But if you haven't made that commitment, then certainly you're not entitled to do that. And really, what this is, the way that I see it, he's saying, is 16 rounds a day a must for everyone on this path? I'd say no, it's not necessarily a must. But what is a must is the chanting of that name, the meditation on the name. That's a must. And also regulation and steadiness in it. That's also becomes a must, right? So it may not be 16, right? It may be 8, it may be 4, it may be 2, it may even be 1, but do it with regulation and do it with steadiness. Dedicate yourself to that. Make a commitment, because if you don't, you end up going backwards. So it's kind of like you got to take, it's like you got to take some land and plant your flag in it, right, and maintain that. And then when you're ready to take the next step, you move forward and you plant the flag there. And if you don't plant the flag, you're just going back and forth all the time. So regulation and steadiness is really important. So I would say to Paul, it's not necessary that you chant 16. The day may come where you vow to do that. But if you haven't done that, then you may also want to find someone that can guide you in this, and eventually, even without making that formal commitment. But dedicate some time, dedicate some part of your day, and do it every day, and take it seriously, and that will become very valuable. And without that, it's going to be difficult to make steady progress. So not necessarily 16, but steadiness and regulation in your meditation.
Krishna consciousness every day.
Thank you.
That's a good answer.
I think that was Geritol every day.
Geritol. Yeah, I know. I think that's where I got it. Geritol every day. Krishna consciousness.
I do this.
I almost, because I think he's almost got to like reframe how he's thinking about chanting. It's not like you have to do it. It's like, we get to do this. This is for, it's not like it's like some, okay, and then you got to sandblast the chimney, and then I want you to clean out the basement. No, we get to chant the holy name. It's like, this is a chance to really change our consciousness and change our mind. We get to do this. We're fortunate enough to do this. How can we add it to our life more and more? Don't look at it as a job, right? Look at it as like, this is a blessing. This is the means out of the maze. And they confided that I knew when I having a rough day and things are falling apart, I need to chant more. So it's this great thing that we get to do. To keep it all together. All right. This is from
Cameron. This is for both of us.
Who's Cameron?
Cameron. Came via email.
Okay. There's others out there we don't know.
Cameron writes, first, I would like to thank you for answering my last question. I took Raghunath's advice.
Second question.
I took Raghunath's advice and have been chanting the Maha Mantra every day. Oh, look at this. It's all tying in. I've been chanting the Maha Mantra every day, either reading Prabhupada or listening to Wisdom of the Sages daily, and it's truly been transformative. So that's it, right? Hearing and chanting. Those are the two most fundamental practices of bhakti. Shravanam, kirtanam, right? Hearing Bhagavatam, chanting Mahamantra. This person's been doing it every day, at least one round. Perfect. Fantastic.
You get to take them. You get the opportunity to take the medicine. It's a great thing. Bhakti.
Okay.
It's a great thing.
Okay. So you guys referenced the story of King Pariksit, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 8, Text 5, where it says, persons who, this is a great verse, right, Raghu? Persons who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter very seriously will have the personality of God at Sri Krishna manifested in their hearts within a short time. And I feel I have been having this experience myself. Right?
It works.
I just finished
it works if you work it.
Bhakti. It works if you work it.
There you go. That's it.
Okay. So Cameron says, I just finished reading The Path of Perfection by Srila Prabhupada. I felt it was a good intro to Bhakti. That's just a little book, but a nice one, right?
Yep. That's a great book, actually.
Yeah. I'm going to start another book, and I'm undecided between... Okay, here's the question, Raghunath. I'm undecided between Krishna book, which is a summary of the 10th canto, which is the story of Krishna's life, you could say.
All the Krishna stories.
All the Krishna stories. She's Cameron. That's a female name, right? Cameron. It could be both, is it?
Could be both.
So Cameron says, Cameron writes, I'm going to start another book, and I'm undecided between the Krishna book or the Bhagavad-gita. What do you both have to say about these books? Which should I start with? Many thanks for everything. Finding your show has been a blessing. Raghunath, what do you recommend? Bhagavad-gita or Krishna book?
I think it depends on the person.
Okay.
My personal self, I couldn't get through either one of them. When I got into Bhakti, I was like, I can't,
Okay.
I don't get any of these. Like Dhritarashtra said, I was like, that's enough for me. I can't do that. Dhritarashtra. And then Krishna book was just like, what is going on? What's the first lines of the Krishna book?
I forget.
When there's a demoniac kings on the planet. It's just like demoniac kings on the planet. The supreme lord, the earth, Bhumi, turned into a cow and approached the demigods. I was like, no, I can't do this. My mind just shuts down. If people say, what book should I get into for Bhakti? I give them Radhanath Swami's Journey Home. It's a simple read. It's a personal adventure. It's peppered with Bhakti. But if I personally had to pick between those two books, and you have some faith in Krishna's leelas and stories like that, like you don't think like this is ridiculous, because some people are like that when they read Krishna's pastimes. I love the Krishna book. I love the Krishna book a lot. If you like stories like that are peppered with spiritual truths. That being said, some people are a little bit more philosophical, and it's very philosophical, but some people are just like, they don't care in all this, Krishna Leela stuff. I want philosophy. And they come from that angle. Then you read the Bhagavad-gita. It's time-tested wisdom endorsed by Henry David Thoreau, stuff like that, depending where you're coming into this game. So my vote, Krishna book. And I still do it. Still do Krishna book. Krishna book. Every day.
I vote Bhagavad-gita.
All right.
Now, what's Cameron gonna do? No, what I would suggest this. I would suggest a little Bhagavad-gita in the morning, a little Krishna book at night. What do you think about that?
I like that plan.
There you go. Little Bhagavad-gita, 20 minutes with it every morning. One chapter a day, something like that. Steady, regular, every day. And then the evening, wind it down with little Krishna Leela, some stories. And that's
Krishna
a really nice combination.
Every evening.
So I think that's a really good combination and worth considering. I've found that I sometimes have a hard time keeping my mind focused on one thing for lengthy periods of time. But if you break it up, it's easier. So why not read both books, right? And I think morning is good for Gita and evening is good for Krishna book too. I think it's a nice way to do it.
I think there's, and it depends on where this person might be pretty evolved and just be like, yeah, I get all this stuff. I'm totally into it.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I sounded like critical or blasphemous. That was just when I came into Bhakti. I got into Bhakti less from the books and more from the devotees that I sort of resonated with, that like explained it to me. I literally moved into an ashram before I even read a book. I just liked what the devotees had to say, and I had faith in what they said, and I had faith in their lifestyle, and faith in the whole system. I got into reading and studying later after I took classes and had a teacher explain the Bhagavad-gita to me, etc. Then I developed a really accelerated pace of loving to study.
And now?
Now audiobooks and YouTube videos.
Okay.
Audiobooks.
Okay. I have a question for you from Ariana Lindberg.
Ariana Lindberg, permaculture princess, we call her.
Okay, and she says kind of this is on behalf of me and David Charles Wilson. So it's
Mustache and under.
Mustache and under. So Ariana writes, Hare Krishna, dear Kaustubha, Raghunath, and Mara, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. She says, is there a proper grace prayer that devotees can offer prior to eating a meal that was prepared by someone else, whether it was prasadam received at a Sunday feast or a meal taken at the home of a non-devotee family member, for example? We prepare most of our meals at home, and we recite the prayers for offering the food to Krishna, along with the Panchatattva mantra and a few Hare Krishnas. But we'd like to know how to give thanks the Vaishnava way, even if we haven't physically placed the offering on the dishes on our home altar for the Lord. With great gratitude, your servant Ariana, on behalf of both of us.
Great question. I think we need a simple Hare Krishna prayer, just a simple one. Well, we got.
Are you going to make one up, right?
We got the Maha Mantra.
I'm going to come up with one.
I think we should. I think it's time to rebirth this.
Okay.
But there is one when you take prasadam that Bhakti-Vinod Thakur wrote. He lived in the 1800s.
There is the one that Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, the incredibly influential and important saint of our tradition, had. But
she's saying, but I got my own. Hear me out. It's rub-a-dub-dub. Thanks for the prasadam. Okay. No, it's but there is one that Prabhupada taught us to say, and it's this appreciation for prasad, Sadidada Vidyajal. Maybe we could put it on the board, but that's for prasad. But she was also making this point, like sometimes you go to someone's house and it's definitely not prasad, and instead of saying, waiter, take back this food, I don't need anything cooked. Sometimes you just want to say a simple prayer. So you could, I would chant the Panchatattva Maha Mantra and the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra over the food, and say, I would say. Thank you, Lord, for this food. The idea is we're trying to remember Krishna and not forget him. And so even if I'm at a place where the food isn't appropriately offered or cooked in devotion, but it's being served with love, or even if it's not being served with love, it's being served for profit, like you're at a restaurant, having some acknowledgement that this is coming from God and making those moments before you eat a sacred moment, that changes the mood of the entire meal. What do you think about that, Kaustubha?
Well, I think, in a more, like you and I had that kind of temple experience and Vrindavan experience. And so like, say we were eating in Vrindavan, we'd all be sitting on the floor, right? And like leaf plates would be put in front of everyone sitting, in different rows. And then people come and they would put the food on the plates as you're sitting there. And at that time, you would chant that Bengali prayer, right? Right? You chant that prayer. So there is that prayer that's there. But it's an interesting prayer. And, I think nowadays, like even like David Charles and Ariana, who've been into this for a couple of years now, and, regularly attend, like they go to the Bhakti Center, and, you go to the Bhakti Center for Thursday night kirtan. At the end, you don't all sit down in rows and chant that prayer. You stand in line and you go to a table and you get served out that way, which in one sense is a bit of a shame, isn't it? Right? Like that cultural aspect.
Yeah. That it's sweet. It's sweet, but Vaishnav culture's sweet. I like much better sitting down and serving out and being served like that rather than the buffet line.
Yeah, and that's so. But what is that? I think it's worth it. People that are like kind of on Ariana and David's level of involvement and commitment and interest, that they learn that prayer. That's part of what it means to be a Gaudiya Vaishnava, at this stage of the
Right.
game, Bhakti knows prayer. But let's try to understand what the prayer says. It's an interesting prayer, right? I think even the prayer
it's a pretty like deep prayer for like having grace with your parents or something like that. Want to share the translation? I could whip it out.
I think I've got it, and I think even you could say that like it could use a softer translation, maybe.
You could use a
like
softer translation.
All right, yeah. But basically, what the prayer is saying is that this material body, it's like it has these senses which are problematic.
You're dancing around it. Why don't you say it first and then reword it?
The material
First
body. It says the material body is a network of ignorance, and the senses are one's deadly enemies, for they throw the soul into an ocean of material sense gratification. This is. I haven't read this translation before. It's a little different.
Oh, I've read this one. This is a good one.
And it says that among the senses, the tongue is the most voracious and difficult to control. Okay, so it's saying I'm stuck. It's kind of a metaphysical kind of meditation, right? I'm the spirit soul stuck within a body that's got these senses that are pulling me everywhere. And amongst all these senses, the tongue, it really, it's got a mind of its own in a sense, right? It's dragging me here and there.
Yeah. This prayer gets dark before it gets light. So keep going.
It gets light and so that's the first verse. And then the second verse says, although the tongue is so difficult to control, Krishna is so merciful that he's giving us prasadam, right? That in other words, that food, which is one of, it's probably the most basic instinct, right? Is to eat food, and what to speak of enjoy palatable food. The tongue wants to go there, and there's karma involved in that, right? I'm taking something that's not mine, and enjoying it, and that entangles one. But the prayer is saying that Krishna is so kind that if you just make an offering of it, then it becomes prasadam. And so that when you eat that, now actually you're not becoming entangled in karma, but actually it's freeing you and it's uplifting you. So the second verse says that, Lord, brothers, Lord Krishna is very merciful. Just to control the tongue, he has given us the remnants of his own food, the prasadam, right? Now please eat these nectarian grains while singing the glories of their lordship, Sri Radha and Krishna, and call out Chaitanya Nitai. So in other words, be grateful, right? Be grateful that we can, even as a yogi, we don't have to be incredibly austere. We don't have to completely deny our senses. We can engage our senses in a beautiful way, even with delicious food, if we just make it an offering first. And then that eating that food doesn't entangle you, it actually uplifts you. So that's the nature of that prayer. And it is a nice thing to, I always chant that prayer every day before whatever meal I have. And it's a really appropriate and important meditation. In other ashrams, they chant another prayer. You know what they chant in some other ashrams, Raghunath?
No. What?
They chant Bhagavad-gita 4:24, Brahmarpadam, that verse, that, where the offering, everything becomes Brahman, right? What is offered becomes Brahman. Like when the food is offered, it becomes spiritual. Oh, right. The person that eats it becomes spiritual. The act of offering it is spiritual. The entire thing becomes spiritual. So I know certain ashrams, they chant that. But I would learn that one, that's Sarira Avidya Ja one. It's a good one to learn. I think we're out of time.
Material body is a network of ignorances, and the senses are one's deadly enemies. Among the senses, the tongue is the most voracious and uncontrollable. It is very difficult to control the tongue within this age. But that's when it gets light. That's when the sun rises. All right. That's the show, man. It's 9:04. We did it. Right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tomorrow. Harley tomorrow. So parents of Nitai Lieberman and Karuna, we don't know what we're going to get. We're trying to tame a wild bull here. He promised he'd be on his best behavior, but we don't know what that means. We don't know what that means. But we're excited to pick his brain and hear some stories from Harley. We're going to reflect on how he's got and talk about his movie that's coming out. Oh, yeah. And that's happening at noon tomorrow. So we hope we get some of y'all, and we hope we get some Californians in there that don't. Mary, how can we tell the Californians, the others out there that are Californians?
I'll put it out on Discord.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. If you're new, listening to this on Facebook, we do this every day at 6 a.m. Eastern time on Zoom. So you can join us even live on Zoom. And right now, I'm looking at everybody on Zoom. Yep, I'm looking at you. You're like, me? Me? Yes, you. I'm looking at you in your kitchen and your back porch and your living room. I'm staring at all of you right now. At walking outside. Join us on Zoom. Go to email Mara, wisdomofthesages108@gmail.com, and she'll send you the Zoom links. You can also send questions. Your question can be answered. Try to do our best answering these questions. And just listen to us wherever you get podcasts. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, like, follow, and comment. That means a lot to us. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Now, hands in the air. Oh, look, our live crew is dancing here too. It's a magical process that involves dancing and singing and eating.